Mara had worked the night shift at the Hargrove Museum of Natural History for 11 months. And in that time, she had learned 3 things. 1. The stuffed elk on the second floor looked alive if you caught it wrong in the emergency lighting. 2. The heating system made a sound like an old man chewing with his mouth open. 3. Nothing in this building ever changed. Until the meteorite started humming. She first heard it on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were the worst shifts because Tuesdays came after Mondays, and Mondays were when her mother called. The calls were never long. Her mother treated conversation the way a surgeon treated a wound. Get in, do the minimum, get out, bill someone later. This Monday's call had lasted 4 minutes. The other 2 were her mother asking if Mara had thought any more about going back to school, and Mara saying she had not, in fact, thought about that, because she was too busy thinking about literally anything else. So Tuesday found her in a mood. She was on her 3rd lap of the ground floor, dragging her flashlight along the display cases, like a kid dragging a stick along a fence, when she heard it. Low, steady, the kind of sound that lived in the back teeth more than the ears. She stopped walking. The sound did not stop. It came from the geology wing, which was the museum's way of saying the hallway nobody visits. The geology wing had rocks. That was it. Rocks behind glass with little cards that said things like Feldspar, circa 3.2 billion years ago, as if anyone had been there to check. Mara had always felt a strange sympathy for the geology wing. It tried so hard. Nobody cared. Her boots made no sound on the polished floor. The museum at night was a held breath, everything waiting for something that never came. The meteorite sat in the center of the wing, on a raised platform under a glass dome. It was about the size of a basketball, black and pitted, ugly in the way that only truly old things are ugly. The little card beside it read, Iron-Nickel Meteorite, recovered 2011, Barron's Expedition, Northern Canada. Mara had passed it 600 times. She had never once felt anything about it. Now it hummed. She pressed her ear to the glass. The sound thickened. Not louder, deeper, like a voice trying to form words through a wall of water. Okay, she said to nobody. That's new. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice memo app, held it against the glass for 30 seconds, played it back. Just the wheeze of the heating system and the distant tick of the lobby clock. She pressed her ear to the glass again. The hum was there, right there, vibrating against her cheekbone like a second pulse. She recorded again, played it back. Nothing. Mara stared at the meteorite. The meteorite did not stare back because it was a rock, but it hummed, and that hum felt directed, and she did not like the word that rose in her mind to describe it. Intentional. She backed away, finished her rounds, wrote nothing in the log, went home at 6 in the morning, and sat on her kitchen floor, eating cereal from the box, because she had not bought milk in a week, and the bowl situation was, to put it generously, criminal. The cereal was stale. She ate it anyway. She was thinking about the hum. Mara's apartment was a studio above a laundromat on Finch Street. The laundromat ran until midnight, which meant her floor vibrated gently for most of the evening, which meant she had gotten very good at sleeping through low-frequency noise. This was important. This was the thing she kept coming back to as she lay on her mattress, with the curtains doing almost nothing about the morning sun. She could hear through low-frequency noise. She was practically an expert, and the meteorite's hum was not the same. It had texture, grain, like the difference between white noise and someone whispering in a language you almost recognize. She pulled her pillow over her face. Go to sleep, she told herself. It's a rock. The rock disagreed, not out loud, but somewhere behind her sternum, in that place where certainty lives before the brain gets involved. Mara knew the rock disagreed. This was a fact she kept in the same locked drawer, where she kept his watch, his field notebook, and the photo of him holding her on his shoulders at age 4. Her in a yellow raincoat, him squinting into the sun, both of them grinning like people who did not know what was coming. He had disappeared 12 years ago during a research expedition in northern Canada. The official report said, presumed dead, exposure. The unofficial version, the one her mother never said out loud but wore on her face like a scar, was that he had walked away, left them, chosen rocks over his family, and then gotten himself killed by the cold because he loved the empty places more than he loved the full ones. Mara did not talk about her father. She did not think about her father. She had a locked drawer and a night job and a system, and the system worked. The system worked. She slept, dreamed of nothing, woke at 4 in the afternoon, and made coffee so strong it could have filed its own taxes. She showered, she dressed, she drove her 12-year-old Honda to the museum, and parked in the employee lot, which was just the regular lot, but sadder. Gerald was at the front desk, finishing the day shift. Gerald was 63, had a white mustache that looked borrowed from a walrus, and called everyone Chief. "Evening, Chief," he said. "Evening, Gerald." "Quiet day. Some school kids threw a penny into the fountain. I fished it out. Highlight of my career. Living the dream. Dying it, more like." He winked. Gerald always winked after his own jokes, as if his face needed to confirm that humor had occurred. Mara took the keys, clipped the radio to her belt. Gerald left. The museum emptied. The lights went to half, then quarter, then the dim orange glow of the emergency strips along the floor. She was alone. East wing, west wing, second floor, gift shop, bathrooms, loading dock. Everything where it should be. Elk still creepy. Heating system still disgusting. She saved the geology wing for last. The meteorite sat under its dome, black, pitted, still. She stood in front of it, waited. 5 seconds, 10. Nothing. She let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Stupid. It was a rock. Rocks did not hum. She had been tired, her brain doing that thing brains do when they are bored and lonely and running on stale cereal, making patterns out of nothing, finding signals in noise. She turned to leave. The hum started. Low, steady, right at the base of her skull, like a fingertip pressing into the soft place where her spine met her head. Mara turned back. The meteorite sat in its dome. The little card glowed faintly in the emergency light. Iron nickel meteorite. Recovered 2011. Barron's Expedition, Northern Canada. She read the card again. She had read it 600 times, and she was reading it now for the first time. Barron's Expedition. Her father's last expedition had been in the Barrens. The drawer in her chest rattled. She pressed her hand flat against it. Not the drawer, her actual chest, right over the sternum, and held it there, as if she could keep the thing locked by force. The meteorite hummed. Mara stood in the dark museum and did not move for a very long time. Mara did not Google it that night. She wanted to. She could feel the urge in her fingers, the way a smoker feels the ghost of a cigarette, 3 months after quitting. The shape of the thing she was not doing pressing against her from the inside. Instead, she finished her shift. She checked every door. She tested every alarm. She logged the time and temperature at every station, and she wrote her entries in the neatest handwriting of her life, each letter a small act of control. In the log, under unusual activity, she wrote, none. She drove home. She made toast. She ate the toast standing over the sink, because plates were still a problem, and she was starting to think plates might always be a problem. She brushed her teeth. She got into bed. She lay there for 45 minutes, staring at the ceiling. Then she got up, went to her closet, and pulled down the shoebox from the top shelf. She had taped it herself 4 years ago, on a night she did not like to remember. A night involving her mother's attic, a bottle of cheap wine, and a kind of crying that came from somewhere below the lungs. She had taken what she could carry. She had taped the box. She had written, "Do not open," on the tape in permanent marker, because she had been 22 and dramatic and a little drunk, and because she had meant it. She held the box in her lap. The tape was brown and brittle. The marker had faded. "Do not open" looked more like a suggestion now than a command. She peeled it off. The sound was small and final, like a bone cracking. Inside, the watch, still ticking, which made no sense because she had never changed the battery. The field notebook, leather cover gone soft and dark with age. The photograph, face down. She left the photograph face down. She opened the notebook. Her father's handwriting was the opposite of hers. Wild, slanted, the kind of handwriting that belonged to someone whose hand was always trying to keep up with a brain running 3 steps ahead. She had forgotten this. She had forgotten the specific mess of him, the way his letters crashed into each other like passengers on a bus that stopped too fast. The notebook was full of coordinates, mineral compositions, temperature readings, field geology, boring, dense, precise in its chaos. She flipped through it with the careful speed of someone looking for something they were not ready to find. She found it on page 47. A sketch, not of a rock formation or a soil sample, but of something round, pitted, roughly the size of a basketball. Beside it, in her father's crashing handwriting, "Object not catalogued. Not iron nickel, or not only iron nickel. Resonance at 14.2 Hz. Infrasound range. Can feel it in the chest. Neil says I'm imagining it. I am not imagining it." Below that, underlined twice, "It responds to proximity." Mara closed the notebook. She set it on the mattress beside her. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs and looked at the wall of her apartment, which was blank and beige, and had never once demanded anything of her. "Okay," she said. She opened the notebook again, flipped forward. Page 51. Resonance stronger today. 14.2 Hz consistent. Tried recording, nothing on playback. Only live. Only close. Beginning to think it's not acoustic. Page 54. Neil left base camp. Says the cold is getting to him. Cold is fine. I barely notice it anymore. Spending more time with object. The resonance changes when I touch the surface. Not frequency, not amplitude, but something. Like it adjusts. Like it listens. Page 58. I know how this sounds. I am a scientist. I know how this sounds. But the object knows I'm here. I don't mean that metaphorically. The entry stopped on page 61. The rest of the notebook was blank. Mara turned the blank pages anyway, one by one, as if the words might be hiding. As if her father might have written in invisible ink, because he was quirky like that, because he was the kind of man who would do something impractical and strange, just because it delighted him, because delight was his organizing principle, and that was the thing she missed most, and could not say out loud. The pages were blank. She put the notebook down. She picked up the watch. It ticked against her palm, steady and impossible, a heartbeat inside a dead man's timepiece. The next night at work, she brought the notebook. She told herself she brought it for reference, scientific comparison. She was going to check the sketch against the actual meteorite and confirm whether it was the same object, which was a reasonable and adult thing to do. And she was a reasonable adult who ate toast for dinner and had not done laundry in 9 days. Gerald was chatty during the handoff. His daughter had called. His daughter lived in Portland and made pottery and was dating someone named River, which Gerald found suspicious on principle. "River," he said, shaking his head. "That's not a name. That's a geographical feature." "It's nice," Mara said, because she was not listening. "It's wet, is what it is." She took the keys. She waited for the museum to empty. She went straight to the geology wing. The meteorite did not hum. She stood there, notebook in hand, waiting. Nothing. The heating system chewed. The emergency lights buzzed. Somewhere upstairs, the elk judged her in silence. Held it up beside the glass dome. Same shape. Same pitting pattern. The craters matched. The long groove along what her father had labeled the equator was identical. Same size. Same ugly, ancient, careless beauty. This was her father's object. The card said recovered 2011. Her father disappeared in 2011. The card said Baron's expedition. Her father had been on the Baron's expedition. These were not coincidences. These were facts that had been sitting 6 feet away from her for 11 months, waiting for her to look. She pressed her forehead to the glass. "Come on," she whispered. "Do the thing." The meteorite sat there like a rock, because it was a rock, and rocks did not perform on command, and she felt foolish in the specific way that only happens at 2 in the morning in an empty building when you are talking to a mineral. She pulled back, wiped the forehead smudge off the glass with her sleeve, turned to leave. The hum rose, not from the meteorite, from the notebook, from the open page in her hand. She felt it through the leather cover, through her fingers, up her arm, settling behind her sternum, like a cat curling into a space it had always owned. She looked down at the sketch. The lines of her father's drawing were vibrating. Not visibly. There was no movement she could see, but the ink thrummed under her fingertips, the way a guitar string thrums after the note has gone. She looked at the meteorite. The meteorite was glowing. Not bright, not like a lamp or a screen, more like the way skin glows when you hold a flashlight behind your hand. A dull, deep warmth pushing through from somewhere inside. Notebook and rock. The same frequency, the same grain, the same voice speaking from 2 mouths. Mara stood in the geology wing at 2:14 in the morning, holding a dead man's notebook, watching a rock glow, and the drawer in her chest was not just rattling now. It was shaking. It was coming open. She closed the notebook. The glow died. The hum faded. She stood there in the dark, breathing. "Okay," she said again, because it was the only word that felt safe, the only word small enough to hold the shape of a world that was rearranging itself around her without her permission. She clipped her radio. She checked the east wing. She checked the west wing. She logged her entries. Normal, normal, normal. She wrote nothing about the glow. She wrote nothing about the hum. She wrote nothing about her father's handwriting vibrating against her skin like a message sent 12 years too late. Under unusual activity, she wrote none. She went home. She did not open the box again. She put the notebook under her pillow. She slept with her hand on it, the way she had once slept with her hand on her father's chest as a child, feeling the rise and fall, the proof of presence, the steady evidence that the people who mattered were still there. The notebook did not hum while she slept, but the watch ticked on. She lasted 3 days before she cracked. 3 days of normal shifts, normal rounds, normal Gerald with his walrus mustache and his deep suspicion of anyone named after a body of water. 3 days of walking past the geology wing and not stopping. 3 days of the notebook under her pillow and the watch ticking on her nightstand, and the cereal going from stale to something that might qualify as a geological sample itself. On the 4th day, she called in sick. She never called in sick. Her supervisor, a woman named Diane, who spoke exclusively in sighs, made a sound on the phone like a tire losing air. "You're never sick," Diane said. "I'm sick now." "What kind of sick?" Mara looked at the notebook on her kitchen counter. "Stomach thing." "There's a stomach thing going around," Diane said, which was what Diane said about every illness, as if all human disease was a single rotating stomach thing making its way through the population like a bored houseguest. Mara hung up. She showered. She put on actual pants, not pajama pants, not the sweatpants with the hole in the left knee that she had been telling herself were casual for 3 months, but real pants with a zipper and everything. She brushed her hair. She looked like a person who had somewhere to be. She drove to the public library. The Hargrove Public Library was a squat brick building on Pine Street that smelled the way all libraries smell, like paper and quiet and the particular loneliness of people who need a place to sit that isn't home. Mara had not been inside since she was 17, when she had checked out a book on mineralogy because her father had recommended it, and she had read it cover to cover in one night. And then he had disappeared 2 weeks later, and she had never returned the book, and she probably owed the library somewhere around $900 in late fees. She walked in with her head down. The reference desk was staffed by a young man with round glasses and a cardigan that looked like it had been knitted by someone who loved him more than they understood proportion. His name tag said, Owen. "Hi," Mara said. "I need to find information about a specific research expedition. Geology, Northern Canada, 2011. That's specific." "I'm a specific person." He led her to the archive room, which was in the basement, which was colder than the rest of the building in a way that felt intentional, as if the library wanted you to know that the past was not a warm place. The archive had newspaper records on microfiche, which Mara had never used before, and which turned out to be exactly as miserable as it sounded. She sat in front of the machine, scrolling through blurry text, her neck developing a crick that would take up permanent residence for the next week. She found the first article in the Hargrove Courier, dated November 2011. Local paper, small story, back page. Geologist missing in Northern Expedition. Dr. Thomas Voss, 41, of Hargrove, has been reported missing following a research expedition to the Barrens region of Canada's Northwest Territories. Dr. Voss was part of a 5-person team studying mineral deposits in the area. His colleagues reported him missing on October 29th after he failed to return to base camp. Search operations are ongoing. Mara read the article twice. Her father's name looked strange in print, like seeing someone you know in a photograph taken before you were born, familiar and foreign at the same time. She scrolled forward. December 2011, another article, smaller. Search called off for missing geologist. Search operations for Dr. Thomas Voss have been suspended due to severe weather conditions. Dr. Voss is presumed deceased. The expedition's remaining members have returned to their respective institutions. A memorial service will be held at First Presbyterian Church on December 18th. She remembered the memorial. She had been 14. She had worn a black dress that was too big in the shoulders, and her mother had pinned it with a safety pin that poked her all through the service. The small, bright point of pain in her shoulder blade. She had focused on it so completely that the eulogies became just sound, just mouths moving, just air being shaped into words that meant nothing, because the person they described was not in the room, and the room was not big enough to hold what had actually happened. The pin. She remembered the pin. She kept scrolling. January 2012. Nothing. February. Nothing. The world had moved on. Her father had become a back-page story, and then no story at all, which was how it worked, which was the thing nobody told you about grief, that the world's forgetting was faster and more complete than your own, and you ended up carrying it alone not because people were cruel, but because people had other things to carry. She switched approaches. She searched for the Barrens expedition itself, not her father. The expedition had been funded through a university consortium, 3 schools pooling resources for a mineral survey. The team had included her father, a man named Neil Prather, a woman named Dr. Lena Goss, and 2 graduate students whose names Mara did not recognize. Neil, the name from the notebook. Neil says I'm imagining it. She searched for Neil Prather, found a faculty page at a university in British Columbia. Still active, still teaching. A photograph showed a man in his late 50s with the kind of tan that comes from actual fieldwork, not vacations, and eyes that were either kind or tired or both. She wrote down his office number on the back of a receipt. Then she searched for the meteorite. Iron nickel meteorite, recovered 2011, Barron's expedition. The museum's acquisition records were not in the library, but she found a brief mention in a geological survey report. The meteorite had been catalogued and transported by Dr. Lena Goss after the expedition's conclusion. It had been donated to the Hargrove Museum in 2013. 2 years after her father disappeared, his rock had come home. Mara sat in the cold basement of the library and let that fact settle into her body. It sat in her stomach like a stone. Not the metaphorical kind, the actual kind. Heavy and mineral and ancient, and indifferent to her feelings about it. She gathered her notes. She thanked Owen, who asked if she had found what she was looking for, and she said yes in a way that meant no, and he nodded in a way that meant he understood the difference. She sat in her car in the library parking lot for 20 minutes. The engine was off. The receipt with Neil Prather's number was on the passenger seat. Her phone was in her hand. It rang 4 times. Geology department, this is Neil. His voice was deep and unhurried, the voice of a man who spent most of his time talking to rocks and had adjusted his pace accordingly. Dr. Prather, my name is Mara Voss. Silence. Not the empty kind, the kind that has a shape. Voss, he said. Thomas Voss was my father. More silence. She could hear him breathing. She could hear something in the background, a fan maybe, or a ventilation system, or the particular white noise of a room that had been quiet for too long. I was wondering when this call would come, he said. The sentence landed in her chest like a dart. She gripped the steering wheel with her free hand, even though the car was parked, and she was going nowhere. What does that mean, she said. It means I think we should talk. Not on the phone. Can you come to the university? That's a 2-day drive. I know where Hargrove is. A pause. I know what's in the museum there. Has it started yet? The hum. He was asking about the hum. Yes, she said. Neil Prather let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for 12 years. Come to the university, he said. Bring whatever your father left you. And Mara, don't touch the meteorite again. Not until we've talked. Promise me that. She promised. She hung up. She sat in the parking lot and watched the clouds move over the library roof, slow and indifferent, and the watch on her nightstand at home ticked through the silence she had left behind, counting the seconds between who she had been this morning and who she was becoming now. She told Diane it was a family emergency, which was both a lie and the truest thing she had said in years. Diane sighed. How long? A week, maybe less. The stomach thing turned into a family emergency? Life is unpredictable, Diane. Another sigh, deep enough to register on weather instruments. Fine. Gerald can cover. He'll complain, but he complains about everything. Last week he complained about the vending machine for 20 minutes. 20 minutes, Mara. About a vending machine. Mara packed a bag. She was a bad packer. She knew this about herself the way she knew she was left-handed and afraid of geese. It was built in, structural, not something effort could fix. She put in 4 shirts and 1 pair of socks. She put in the notebook. She put in the watch. She did not put in the photograph. The photograph stayed face down in the box on the closet shelf. It could stay there. It could stay there forever. She did not need to see his face to do this. She got in the Honda and pointed it north. The drive from Hargrove to the university in British Columbia was supposed to take 14 hours. Mara did it in 2 days because her car had opinions about speed, and those opinions were conservative. The Honda topped out at 65 on a good day, and this was not a good day. This was a day in February, on highways that had been salted into a gray paste, under a sky the color of an old dish rag. She drove through 3 states and 1 border crossing. The border guard asked the purpose of her visit. She said, "Tourism, because I'm driving to ask a stranger what happened to my father after a museum rock started humming at me." Seemed like it would raise follow-up questions. She stopped once at a gas station in northern Washington that sold gas and beef jerky and a profound sense of despair. The bathroom had a sign that said, "Customers only," and a lock that did not work, and a mirror in which Mara caught her own reflection and thought, for one unguarded second, that she looked like her father. Same jaw, same dark eyes set a little too deep, like they were trying to get a running start before looking at the world. Same mouth that sat naturally in a line, that was not quite a frown, but was definitely not a smile. A mouth in neutral, waiting for a reason to commit. She bought gas and jerky. She did not look in the mirror again. The landscape changed as she drove north. The flat brown of eastern Washington gave way to the wet green of British Columbia, where the trees grew tall and close, and the mountains appeared in the rearview mirror, like things that had been following her. She arrived at the university at 4 in the afternoon, on the 2nd day. The campus sat at the edge of a small city that backed up against the mountains. The kind of place where people wore fleece without irony, and the coffee was always too hot, and the air tasted like pine needles and good intentions. Neil Prather's office was on the 3rd floor of the Earth Sciences building, a concrete block from the 70s that had aged the way concrete blocks from the 70s always age, like a punishment. She knocked. "Come in," he said. The office was small and full of rocks, full of papers, full of the accumulated weight of a career spent looking at the ground. Shelves lined every wall, and on those shelves sat specimens, labeled, numbered, catalogued, a miniature museum of one man's attention. A window behind the desk showed the mountains, which seemed too close, like they were eavesdropping. Neil Prather stood up from behind his desk. He was taller than she expected. His face had the worn quality of leather left in the sun. Not old exactly, but exposed. He looked at her and his expression did something complicated. It started as professional warmth, and then cracked, just for a moment, into something raw and unmanaged. And then he put it back together so fast that Mara almost missed it. Almost. "You look like him," Neil said. "I know." He cleared a chair of papers, and she sat down, and he sat down, and for a moment they just existed in the same room, 2 people carrying the same absence, adjusting to the weight of each other. "You said you were expecting my call," Mara said. Neil nodded. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. It was thick and old, the paper inside yellowed at the edges. "Tom and I were friends," he said. "Not just colleagues, friends. We met in grad school. He was the smartest person I ever worked with, and the worst card player I ever met. He could identify a mineral by taste, but he could not bluff to save his life." He said this with a smile that was aimed at the past. The Baron's expedition was supposed to be routine. Mineral survey, soil sampling, standard fieldwork, 6 weeks in and out. But on day 12, Tom found the object. The meteorite, that's what we called it. That's what the reports say. But Tom knew from the first week that it wasn't just a meteorite. Or it was, but it was also something else, something more. "The hum," Mara said. Neil looked at her, straight at her, the kind of look that was checking for something specific. "He told you about it?" "I read his notebook, and I've heard it myself. At the museum. It hums." Neil closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet, and he did not try to hide it, which Mara respected in a way she could not name. "Tom was the only one who could hear it at first," he said. "I thought he was losing it. The cold does that. Messes with your head. Makes you hear things. I told him to get some rest. He told me to go to hell. Classic Tom." He opened the folder, Inside were photocopied pages, her father's handwriting, the same crashing letters, but these were pages she had not seen, pages that were not in the notebook. He kept two records, Neil said, the notebook which was personal, and these which he gave to me on the last day I saw him. He said if anything happened, I should keep them safe. He said someone would come looking eventually. Someone. He said Mara will come. His exact words. Mara will come, and when she does, she'll need to know what it is. The room was very still. The mountains outside the window were still. The rocks on the shelves were still. Everything was still, except the thing inside Mara's chest, which was moving, rearranging, making space for something she did not want to hold. He knew, she said. The words came out flat. She wanted them flat. Flat was safe. Flat was a surface you could walk on, without falling through. He knew he wasn't coming back, Neil said. And he knew you would hear it. He said it was familial, that the resonance responds to genetic similarity. He couldn't prove it. He didn't have time to prove it. But he believed it. That's insane. Yes. That's completely insane. Also yes. Mara looked at the folder, the pages, her father's handwriting, preserved by a man who had waited 12 years for a phone call from a stranger. What happened to him, she said, on the last day? What actually happened? His fingers pressed into the wood, as if he were trying to hold himself in place. He went to the object, Neil said, alone, at night. I woke up and he was gone. I went after him and I found... He stopped. The sentence just ended, like a road running out of pavement. You found what? Neil looked at her, and in his face she saw the thing he had carried for 12 years, the thing that had worn his features down to leather, the thing that sat behind his eyes when he said her father's name. I found the object, he said, just the object, sitting in the snow, and Tom was gone. Not dead, not lost, gone. There were no tracks, no sign, no explanation. He was there, and then he was not, and the object sat in the snow, and it hummed. The mountains watched through the window. The rocks sat on their shelves. Somewhere in the building, a heating vent clicked on, and the sound was so ordinary and so small that it almost broke her. Mara picked up the folder. Tell me everything, she said. Neil talked for 3 hours. He talked about the expedition's first week, which had been normal. Cold, boring, methodical. The way good science is supposed to feel. He talked about her father finding the object, half buried in permafrost. How Tom had dug it out with his bare hands because his gloves were too thick for the work, and patience was never his strength. He talked about the first night after the discovery, when Tom stayed up until 4 in the morning, with his ear against the object's surface, scribbling in his notebook, while the wind tore at the tent walls. He talked about the changes, small ones at first. Tom stopped sleeping. Not insomnia. He simply did not seem to need it. He ate less, he talked more, but what he said became harder to follow, as if his thoughts were arriving in a language he had to translate on the fly. He started referring to the object as the signal, then the voice, then just it. The way you refer to something so present, it no longer needs a name. I told him he was scaring me, Neil said. He laughed, said I was the one who should be scared, not of the object, but of what it meant if he was right, if the resonance was real, if it was trying to communicate. Communicate what? Neil pulled a page from the folder. Her father's handwriting, tight and fast, the letters even more chaotic than the notebook. This was a man writing against a deadline he could feel closing. The frequency is not random. It's structured, repeating patterns, not language as we understand it, but organized, sequential, building toward something. The object is not broadcasting, it is responding. It waited for someone to stand close enough, and now it is responding, and the response is getting louder. and I think the response is an invitation. Mara read the page twice. She put it down, she picked it up, and read it again. An invitation to what? Neil shook his head. He didn't say, or he couldn't. The last page is the one that keeps me up at night. He handed it to her. One page. Her father's writing had changed. Looser, slower, the letters spaced far apart, as if he were writing underwater. The frequency matched today. My heartbeat and the object's resonance. Same rate, same rhythm. I felt it lock in like a key turning. The object is not a rock. It is a door, and the door is for me. I don't know where it goes. I know I'm going through it. I know Mara will hear it too someday. The resonance is in the blood. When she hears it, and she will, tell her it's not a haunting. It's a hello. Mara put the page down on the desk. She aligned it with the edge. She adjusted it by 1 millimeter. She adjusted it again. Can I have some water? She said. Neil got up and filled a glass from the sink in the corner. She drank it in one long swallow. The water was cold and tasted like pipes, and she focused on that. The mineral tang, the temperature, the way the glass pressed against her lower lip. Because the alternative was to feel what was pressing against the inside of her chest, and she was not ready for that. Not in this office. Not in front of this man. Not yet. The object, she said, the meteorite in the museum. It's the same one. Yes, Lena cataloged it after we were evacuated. She didn't know what Tom had found. She thought it was a standard iron-nickel specimen. I let her think that. Why? Because Tom asked me to. If the wrong people studied it, they'd treat it as a thing to be cracked open. He wanted it left alone until you were ready. I'm not ready. No, Neil said, but it started anyway. She drove back to Hargrove with the folder on the passenger seat, and her father's last words sitting in her chest like a second heartbeat. The drive was long, and she did not play music. She did not stop for gas until the needle was on the red line, and the Honda was making a sound like a cat being stepped on. She ate a granola bar from a gas station in Oregon, and it tasted like dust and cardboard, and she did not care, because taste had become a low priority in the hierarchy of things demanding her attention. She arrived home at 2 in the morning. She did not go to her apartment. She went to the museum. The night shift was being covered by a temp, a college kid named Marcus, who was asleep at the front desk with his headphones in and his mouth open, dreaming whatever college kids dream about. Loans, probably, or the void. She used her key. She walked past Marcus without waking him. She walked through the lobby, past the gift shop, past the elk, which watched her with its glass eyes like it had been waiting for this specific moment in its long and undignified afterlife. The geology wing was dark. The emergency lights made the floor glow orange, and the meteorite sat in its dome, and Mara stood in front of it with the notebook in one hand and the folder in the other, and her father's watch on her wrist, ticking. She had put the watch on in the car. She did not remember deciding to. It had simply appeared on her wrist somewhere around the Oregon border, as if her hand had made the decision without consulting the rest of her. The meteorite hummed. Not low this time, not subtle. The sound filled the wing the way water fills a glass, rising, even, pressing against the edges of the space. She felt it in her teeth and her wrists, and the place behind her eyes where headaches live. She put her hand on the glass dome. The hum changed. It matched. She could feel it, the frequency clicking into rhythm with her pulse, the way her father had described. A key turning in a lock she had not known she carried. She should stop. She had promised Neil. She had promised. But the hum was not a sound anymore. It was a voice. Not words. Something before words. Something more basic. The raw material from which words are eventually made. It rose through her palm, through her arm, through her shoulder, and it settled in her chest, right behind the sternum, right where the locked drawer had always been. The drawer opened. Not the physical one, not the box on the shelf, the one inside her, the one she had sealed shut at 14 in a black dress with a safety pin in her shoulder, the one she had reinforced with silence and distance and night shifts and stale cereal, and the absolute committed refusal to look at a photograph that was face down in a box, because if she looked at his face, she would have to feel what it meant that his face was gone. It opened, and what came out was not grief. It was recognition. The hum was familiar. She knew this sound. It was the sound of being carried on someone's shoulders in a yellow raincoat. The sound of a man's laugh echoing off the walls of a house that used to be warm. The sound of a hand on the back of her head as she fell asleep. Not the memory of these things, but the frequency of them. The specific vibration that safety makes when it lives inside a person who loves you. The meteorite glowed, warm, deep, the light pushing through its surface like blood through skin. And in that glow, she saw, or felt, or understood, because seeing was not the right word for something that happened behind the eyes. A shape, a presence, not a ghost, not a memory, a signal, a hello. Dad, she said. The word came out wrecked, small and wrecked and too large for her mouth, and it hung in the air of the geology wing at 2:47 in the morning, and the meteorite held it, and the hum held it, and Mara stood with her hand on the glass and her father's watch ticking on her wrist, and she understood that she had been wrong. He had not walked away. He had not chosen rocks over his family. He had found a door, and the door had taken him, and the only thing he had left behind was a way back. Not for him, for her. The glow pulsed, the hum deepened, the frequency was building. She could feel it climbing, reaching for something, the resonance tightening like a rope being pulled from the other side. She could lift the dome. She could touch the surface. She could follow. Mara stood at the edge of the door her father had walked through 12 years ago, and the thing on the other side hummed with his voice, and she was afraid, and she was not afraid, and both of these things were true at the same time, because that is what it means to stand at the edge of something that will change you in ways you cannot undo. She took her hand off the glass. The glow dimmed. The hum softened. The frequency eased, settling back to that low, patient vibration at the base of her skull. Not gone, just waiting. Mara stood in the dark. Not yet, she said, but soon. The meteorite hummed, the watch ticked, and somewhere on the other side of a door made of iron and nickel and 12 years of silence, something that had once been her father heard her and waited and hummed.